Morning, everybody. We are going to be reviewing the Offworld Invader pad with laminate, comparing it to the version that does not have the laminate, as well as taking a look at the Vic Firth Quadropad, which we have the new one. Woo! Fancy, fancy. So that is the plan for today's stream, so stay tuned for that, as my neighbor's dogs are, being a choir right now. They're practicing. It's important to practice. They'll get better. All right, so in this picture earlier that I took, you can see that I have had a bunch of different drum pads that I've played on. This is just some of the ones that we currently own, but I've played on a bunch more different pads. We've got 4 different tenor pads right there, and a bajillion different snare pads and whatnot. So I have a lot of experience playing with a bunch of different pads. We're going to talk about some of the pros and cons for these different drum pads. So let's get into that. Okay, so let me pull this up so I can show you this. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about is like the feel and the sound while playing on the new Vic Firth Quadropad. So when you're playing on this, I've got laminates on all of the drums except for on our left-hand Spock. So when you're playing on this, it feels really good. I honestly just absolutely love the way these are feeling. When I was doing some research for this, I found out that they're actually using Mylar for the laminates. So that's why it feels so close to like playing on Mylar heads on tenors. Now, when you're playing on this, there's a very big difference in the articulation and the sound quality and the volume from playing with a laminate and playing without the laminate, like this one. So I'm going to just give you a quick demo here. So if we're playing, like let's say 3 strokes. Now, if we do that on or without the laminate, it sounds like this. You can't hear all the articulation that you can with a laminate. So if you're playing fast strokes, whether it's a 3-stroke like I was just doing or 2 strokes or whatever, you're not able to hear the articulation and the shortness of the sound that you can when playing with a laminate. So why is that important to consider? So if you are playing with a laminate on, it's going to make it so your notes sound shorter. There's less resonance to it. That is going to make it so that you can actually hear the rhythms better than you can if you're playing without the laminate on it. So even though this is quieter and it might not annoy people, it's not going to allow you to work on like cleaning up fast rolls or 3 strokes or 4s or whatever as you would with laminates. Now, another downside to playing on the pad without the laminates is it actually creates this like little bit of friction when you are doing a scrape or sweep. So when you're moving from one drum to the next and you do not have any laminates on the drums, there's this little bit of like stickiness to it. So if I'm pushing here, I don't slide across like I do on one of these. So let me just give you the overhead view. So if I'm playing, moving the stroke here, if I move to here, my finger like sticks. It stops dead in its tracks. So same thing with your scrapes or your sweeps. So if you're moving from one drum to the next, and you're moving this kind of motion where you're going, like let's say from a Spock to drum 2, it sticks a little bit right here on these drums. So this is something to really consider with this. Now, the Vic Firth pads now have the laminates coming with the set of like tenors, which is like great because with all these like benefits of like the articulation and making it so that it's actually like feels like you're playing on Mylar because you are actually playing on Mylar, I highly recommend putting them on. So previously you had to pay extra to be able to get the laminates, but now it comes with it, and I strongly recommend doing this. So without the laminates, it's going to make your scrape sound worse, or feel worse rather. You're going to have to work a lot harder because they're not going to be able to just move across the drum, glide across them. And then also, it's not going to be as articulate as if you are playing on the laminates. So even though it is quieter, overall, I recommend going with the laminates when doing this. Now, the laminates, let me pull this up. There it is. So the laminates are actually like pretty thick. So if we take a look at the, like this is the laminate that comes with the Offworld Invader pad, and then this is the one that comes with the Vic Firth Quadropad. So if we take a look at like just holding it out at the edge, the amount of like give and whatnot on the Invader, it's significantly thinner than the Quadropad. The Quadropad is much thicker laminate, and these things last. So like my laminates on my old set, excuse me, this is the original laminates that are on here, and I've had this pad, this specific one since 2011. And then I have another pad that I purchased that is the small version of the Quadropad. And that one I purchased, like, I think a few years before that, and still has the original laminates on it. So it lasts. I highly recommend the quality of the laminates on it. Okay, so now let's actually talk about how to put the laminates on here. So when you're putting the laminates on, it's like really easy. So first thing you want to do is just like clean the surface that you're playing on. So I just got a little bit of stuff on it. All you do is peel off the back of it. It's super easy. See, look how easy it is for me to just peel this off. I'm a pro peeler. My PhD is in peeling stuff. I'm like not able to get my fingernail underneath it. Come on, you can do it. I shouldn't have trimmed my fingernails the other day. There we go. Okay, so once you can actually get your fingernails under it, all you do is just peel this off. And then place it where you want it to go. Some people will press in the center. I'll just do like a line and then work my way out from that line. And then it's now adhered to it. And I've never had any of these come off while playing with the old ones. Like, again, those are the originals. So now we've got it on here. And there are 0 bubbles. Unlike the Offworld Invader pad, which I'll get to in a little bit, which starts off with some bubbles in there, but you can fix that. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, now the new Vic Firth Quadropad comes with rims on them. So this is different from the old version of the pads. So these rims, if we take a look at this, it's about thumb distance right here for my drums 1 and 3. Now this is different than the old pad. If we look at this, there's a huge gap in there where my thumb is at. So my thumb did not magically just shrink on the old pad. The reason for this is they tried to compensate for the lack of rims on the old pads by just extending out that gap even more. So that way you would basically avoid where you would hit the rim by just turning it into like nothingness, the wood underneath it. So this makes it so that it feels like it's a little bit closer, but the gap is basically the same because you're obviously not going to want to hit on the rim when doing like scrapes and sweeps and whatnot. So although the old pad did not have rims, it did help you to work with this to be able to get that gap down. But the thing is, when you are doing like a very angled scrape or sweep, so if you're like coming at this at an angle where you're going like this for some reason, if you are doing that, you are more likely to be able to hit the rim here. So this better simulates what it's like when you're actually playing on a set of tenors. So it can help get rid of some of those bad habits and try and get you to more of like a vertical approach rather than like an angled slicing approach when playing on this. So the rims are fantastic for being able to simulate playing on the pad. They are not... I saw some comments of some people who are like, well, the rims aren't like great for practicing rim shots. And it's like, that's not the point of these. Like, yes, you can play rim shots doing this, but the point is to simulate like working on the scrapes and the sweeps without hitting the rim. You want to be able to play like Bill Bachman, who apparently is allergic to rims, because I like never see that guy hit rims ever. Now, the underside of the pads are pretty difficult to slip. And the reason for that is because of this padding that they've got underneath it. The very, very old ones, like the small pad that I used to have like strips of this material, like here, 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 here. And having it like cover basically the entire thing is fantastic. So this thing, like, it will stick when you are setting it down on like a tabletop and something is not going to slide away from you, which is like one of the issues that I have with some other drum pads where when you're playing on it, it's just like constantly moving, like my hi-hat was the other day when I was doing the drum kit stream. Now, some tenor pads will have holes cut in underneath the each one of the drums, and this makes it so that you can have different pitches. So you can hear like beep, bulk, 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 and it has the holes here to simulate the different pitches on the drums. So when you're playing through it, instead of making it all sound the same like this, you'd have like boop, beep, bop, boop, beep, bop, etc. when going around this. Now, this might sound in theory like it's like a good thing to have, but in practice, it actually makes it so that you can't really compare like, well, how does it sound when I'm playing on drum 1 versus on drum 4? What is similar, what is different to the sound quality when I'm like playing my scrapes, your sweeps? You want to make it so that it sounds like nice and even and all the same. By having it so that there are no pitch changes going across the different drums, this can help you with your own practicing to make it so that things sound nice and even. So I have had some students who have had the pads that had like the tone holes cut out in them, and their sound quality was not as consistent or as even as people who use like the Vic Firth Quadropad or other pads where everything sounds the same. So I actually recommend, if you are trying to find a set of tenors and you are just using it for practice purposes, go with a pad like this where it does not have the tone holes. The tone holes may sound good for like sharing clips on social media, because then it doesn't sound like you're just playing on like a tabletop or a snare drum. It'll actually sound like a set of drums. And that could be good for social media, but for your actual practicing, I recommend going with the lack of tone holes, etc. Good morning, Legendary. How you doing? Okay. Now, another thing that is worth noting for the Quadropad is it comes with a handle built into it, so you can actually carry the drum, and it is like heavier than like other drum pads, but you know, it's a larger pad. But it's not as heavy as a set of tenors, so it's really not that big of a deal. There is a smaller size to this, so this is the Quadropad Large, and if you have a smaller set of tenors, like let's say you play with indoor sets of tenors, or just like the smaller, more compact drums, they do come with a small version of that, and it feels just the same as this one does, having had both of those, so I recommend them. Now, the old pads, they used to have the spocks detached from the pad. So you had to choose whether or not you're going to put one spock on, like I've got right here, or two spocks. So if you were teaching like multiple different lines, or if you were performing on multiple different lines and some of them had 5 drums and some of them had 6 drums, it was like, well, what do I do? Do I put the 2 different pads down and you had to adhere this onto here? But the new design actually accommodates for that. So it's got the center drum. If you're playing with 5, you'll play right here, and then those. But if you have 6s, you can play on these 2 drums and right here and right here. So this is fantastic design that makes it so that you can have your cake and eat it too, in terms of being able to have 5 drums or 6 drums when you're working on this. How high should a tenor be? So that kind of depends on how you're playing this. With snare drum, it's like a lot easier to demonstrate because it's like you just go with parallel. But with tenor drums, usually lower is better because it allows you to be able to get like some of the crossovers a little bit better. If your drums are up high like this, it's a little bit harder. You'll have this tendency to raise up your shoulders. So what I generally recommend is to just like go low. It's to the point where you're not hitting your knees though. As low as you can get where it's not like changing the angle of sticks, where you're like playing down here and you're suddenly playing with like a different angle onto the surface. So for me, I have it nice and low. And if you look at like the 2005 Vanguard, when they marched match grip on snare drum, those snare drums were like this height. They were nice and low, and it's really weird to look at, but it's much more comfortable. You can get more power behind it the lower you can get your drums, but again, not so low that you're hitting your knees, and not so low that it's changing the angle of your playing into the head. But back in the day, like in the 90s and before that, well, I guess probably in the 80s and before that, they played with tenors like really high up, and it just creates a lot of unnecessary tension, and it limits the amount of sound quality that you can have because you can't do a full range of motion going into it as if you're like playing down here. So I personally tried to get the tenors nice and low, so you can get the power behind it and the whatnot. Good question, though. Now, no. Why is it not doing that? There we go. Okay, so the Quadropad comes in 2 different sizes. So you can get a small size, you can get a large size. It's the same design and whatnot, but it only comes in this like kind of color scheme, and it is relatively expensive compared to the old set. So this is more expensive. However, it comes with the laminate. So this is something that when I see people talking about this, they're not factoring in the fact that it comes with like the set of laminates for these. And again, I highly recommend going with the laminates. The only reason why you would not want to go with laminates is if you really need to focus on like playing quieter. But you can do stuff like putting a towel on top of your drum if you need to play quiet for like whatever reasons. But in general, it's not as customizable as like some other drum pads where you can get like different colors and different rims or different whatever. So if you're looking for that, go with other companies. But Vic Firth is a very reputable company. They are a solid brand that I've had decades worth of experience with, and I highly recommend them. So I've had zero issues with their products over the years. So strongly recommend. You're very welcome, Snowy. And thank you for stopping in again. Whoa. That's not this one I was on. Okay. Oh, and so the original pad that I had, like I mentioned, so this pad, the large, I bought in 2011, and then the small pad I bought years before that, and I taught privately on them. Had well over 20 students that would come like each weekend, and we would play on the pads all the time, and have had zero issues with it. So even though the pads are like relatively expensive, they will last you a very long time. So even if you buy these pads like secondhand from somebody, odds are they're going to still be great as long as like somebody's not, throwing it into the back of like a pickup truck bed or something and like completely damaging it. But this is like a 14-year-old drum pad right here, and it still survives with the original laminates on it, and played on it all the time, taught on it privately, played on it for my own practicing, etc., and have had no problems with it. So it is an investment in terms of your money, but it is a quality investment that will last you an extended period of time, even if you're beating it up by playing on it all the time. Okay, let me go here. Okay, so now I want to actually talk about the Invader pad, but let me do this. Got that, and we've got that. Okay, sorry. All right, so if you're contemplating getting an Invader pad, I highly recommend getting one. But you might be wondering, okay, should I get a pad without the laminate or a pad with the laminate? How do they sound different? So without the laminates, here we've got like 3 strokes. Now with the laminate, it is way more articulate playing on the laminate than it is without the laminate. Now you'll notice that there was a little bit of a clicking sound at the very beginning of this, and the reason why there was is because there's a little bubble that has appeared like underneath this laminate. So when it came this way, it had some bubbles underneath that you can actually press out by going like this, or by just actually removing this, by peeling this up with a credit card, and then replacing it back down to fix that. So this is something that I'm actually going to do, but the bubble makes a click sound, so let me see if I can find one. So you hear that click? That's bad. You don't want that whenever you're playing a laminate. So it came with a little piece of paper that said, like, this is normal, part of the process. They often come with bubbles in it, and it tells you that you can specifically lift this up and peel it back down, or put it back down, or you can actually try and just like push the bubbles out and work it out of here. So the laminate, just like with the Quadropad, laminates make it so that it is more articulated. There's less resonance, less of the extra sound after your attack. So when you're playing here, this is more resonant than this. Sorry for hitting my microphone. And it makes it so that you can actually hear your articulation better. I personally prefer the shortest possible attack when playing and practicing on a pad, because it makes it so that you can hear like when you're making more mistakes and when you are slightly off with your rhythms, as compared to like a pad like this, where it like comes with usually like ball bearings or like beads or whatever in the bottom of it that simulates a snare sound. This makes it so that it is more resonant. It makes it less likely that you can actually hear some of the individual mistakes that you're going to be making when you're playing. So if I play a roll on here, compared to, it is so much more articulate playing with the laminate on here than not playing with a laminate. So I highly recommend getting the laminate, and I highly recommend not getting the ones that have these little snare gut simulating sounds inside of the pads. even though it might sound neat, it's not going to assist you with your practicing, which is likely the purpose of you getting the pad. So go with the laminate without all the extra fancy stuff. Now let's talk about this. So the Invader pad with the laminate feels way more like a snare drum than something like these like old reel feels do. However, they are significantly louder. So if we play on this pad compared to playing on this pad, it is so much louder playing on the Offworld Invader, especially with the laminate. However, it feels better. So if you are worried about getting pad hands, although this might be a cheaper product, it is likely going to lead to the pad hands because it's not able to simulate the sound and feel of the actual snare drum compared to the Offworld Invader. So as much as I've put a lot of miles on this real feel pad, as you can see from it, I prefer the Offworld Invader completely. Now, for the design of these pads, the rim is actually built into the pad. So unlike the rims where you are attaching it onto the pad and like maybe using the lugs to be able to screw it down into it or onto a head, this pad rim is built into it. You are basically not going to destroy it. If you can, I would be completely shocked. It'd be pretty impressive. So it's not like the rim is going to fall off. You're not going to have to re-glue it, nothing like that. This is built into it by design, and it is fantastic. I've had this Invader pad since 2011, and I've had zero issues with the rim. The only thing I've had is some wear right here, as you can see, like towards the center of this. But since 2011, I've taught on this privately with a bunch of different students on weekends. And no, I don't teach privately anymore. But now I just practice on it, and this is the most amount of damage that I have done after like almost 15 years of practicing on this consistently. So these things are going to last you a very long time. Now, the bottom side of this, you might be wondering, should I get the dark matter side or get the side that has like the little bit of a cushion? Some people actually practice on the dark matter side, but I personally don't really see the point of that when you got the top side. So maybe if you want to do this, if you have the laminate, this would be a little bit quieter. The dark matter bottom does not really slip much. Like I'm pushing it on here and it's sticking. This will provide a little bit more cushion for you in terms of making so that's a little bit softer for whatever you're hitting on, but it also will not slip. Like I'm pushing this and it's like barely budging. So you don't have to worry, unlike these pads, which are constantly slipping out of your lap or your table or whatever. Either the dark matter or the padded bottom of the Invaders will work great in my opinion for not slipping. In terms of size, these pads are relatively large, but they are fairly comparable to the thickness of the Rio Feel. They are a little bit thicker, and they are bigger overall. If you notice, it's just like a little bit bigger. So if you have a large backpack, you should be able to fit it in there just fine. But if you have a large backpack with a lot of stuff in it, you're probably not going to be able to fit your pad inside of there. So that is something to consider when trying to figure out what kind of pad you want to use. You might want to go with like a smaller pad than the Invaders. Looking at my notes here. Oh. Now, if I wanted to practice without annoying people, I would go with something like a Real Feel or something that is much quieter than the Invader with laminates in particular. Although the pad without the laminates is quieter than with the laminates, it's just like a night and day difference. Like if we listen to these two different pads together, even without the laminate, it's significantly louder, but not as articulate. And it's still different than that. Now, what else? Okay, I already talked about that one. Okay. Now, with the Invader, they have a bunch of different products in here, but you're able to customize these. So if you want a different color rim or a different color surface, you can do that. which is neat if that's something of interest to you. But again, I personally don't recommend the ones that come with like the beads to be able to simulate the snare sound. Maybe if you're doing some social media stuff and you want it to sound like a snare, or a little bit more like that, then maybe you could justify that. But in general, it adds more resonance and it takes away from the articulation and the ability to actually hear what it sounds like when you're practicing. So I do recommend just getting like the normal with laminate if you don't have to worry about sound and whatnot. And if you're not sharing this on social media, if you're just practicing, it's great. There are when it comes with a laminate, it has the laminate pre-installed on it. But again, you can lift it back up. But eventually, this center area is going to wear and tear. So it actually does come with an extra little pad that you can replace right here. So you can put that on there, and it is going to like allow you to keep the laminate without it like completely breaking off really quickly. The thing with this is the laminates will not last as long as like the laminates on the Quadropad because they're just significantly thinner. However, it's relatively cheap in the Offworld website to be able to just like order some more. So you can find the replacements for these on Offworld. Where's it at? There's specifically an accessory page. There it is. So on Offworld's website, if you run out of like the replacement pads, you can actually order some more. If you go to the accessories for Offworld, then this will allow you to order some new discs that you can replace in case you break it. Or if you decide ultimately that like you don't want the laminate initially, but you might want to add the laminate later on down the road, well then you can start without the laminate. And if you decide you really want that extra articulation, you can just buy the laminate off of their website. And that's like super easy to do. So it's just a matter of finding where it's at and then going to the accessories section when you're ordering what you want. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. No. Oh, yeah. Now, Offworld has been a company that's been around for a long time. Like I said, I bought this pad in 2011 and had zero issues with the shipping and whatnot. That is not the case for some other percussion companies that I will not name, but you can easily find what people think about them on Reddit, on r/drumline. But I personally have had great experiences with Offworld, have never seen anyone complain about Offworld. They're just like a fantastic company overall. So I highly recommend them, going with them. You should not have any issues with it. And this is not a paid sponsorship by any means. I did not accept any kind of payment for this review, so this is just my honest thoughts on it. I highly recommend the pad, but yeah, if something like weird happens, I'm not sponsored, so sorry. But yeah, that's my very quick overview of both of these different drum pads. I highly recommend both of them, and I especially recommend getting them with the laminates if you don't have to worry about sound. Otherwise, maybe don't put the laminates on. But I know this was a bit of a different stream from what I typically do. Typically, what I'm doing is like sharing how I practice and whatnot and using all these different resources on my website. So if you want to find like more percussion resources, if you just go to jaredoleary.com/drum, this is linked at the top of the screen, but you could find 56 chop exercises, currently over 900 grid variations, over 100 timing exercises, 55 drum charts for straight and swung, over 400 marching bass exercises, just under 300 technique exercises, and then a bunch of drumming tips and lessons and full live stream sessions and whatnot. You can check out how I practice, what I practice, etc. If you have any questions about anything that I mention in any of these streams or any of the drumming tips videos, feel free to leave them in the comments. I do reply to all the comments, and I will often be like, oh yeah, I'll answer that on tomorrow's stream and be able to demonstrate whatever the question was. But I do appreciate everybody stopping by. And if you enjoy this content, just share it with somebody else. It helps me out. And spreading the word about all these free resources. Any video that says members first is scheduled to release publicly for free, so you don't have to like pay for any of this content. So stay tuned for more. I've got over 400 members first videos currently scheduled to release, and working on more. But I'm gonna call it here, and I'm gonna get ready for some Fortnite here in a little bit. So stay tuned for that. But I know this was a bit of a different practice stream than what I normally do, because you know normally I actually practice. But today I was like, all right, I'm gonna do a little review. So I appreciate everybody stopping by, and I'm going to call it here, but I hope this was helpful. But goodbye.